First Eric, now this? Join me on this episode of Battle Guides as we talk about Sagas, the Doppelganger. Sagas is a brawler who uses his great effects in conjunction with his very unique ability to crush even the most powerful stat monsters. However, that all comes at the cost of having generally awkward range, needing proper token management, as well as being only as good as his opponent is. Sagas' unique ability is Shadow Mirror. Long story short, Sagas has a mirror token that he may ante during the ante phase. If he does so, both players gain the bonuses and penalties to range, priority, and power that either player gains. This means that if one of you gets it, both of you get it. In essence, this basically means that Sagas gets to copy his opponent's effects, as Sagas himself does not have any power, range, or priority bonuses or penalties on any of his styles. However, note that this is very important when you're doing other play modes, as Sagas has certain ways of gaining bonuses through those play modes. Now, each beat, after all end of beat effects resolve, if Sagas' current attack pair has a base whose name is the same as one of the bases in his opponent's discard, he gains back his mirror token. Note that he can never have more than one mirror token, and if you're playing in a multiplayer mode, this only applies to the opponent nearest to you. Sagas may treat the mirror token as any other kind of token to fulfill card effects. However, he can only regain mirror tokens via his own effects or effects he copies. This basically means that he can't choose to regain mirror tokens when his opponent is about to regain a token themselves. This unique ability is very interesting because of it, Sagas is a single token character. This means that a lot of his power revolves around the availability of his token, and his token is quite a powerful one to boot. The unique ability is very good against a lot of characters in this game because a lot of characters in this game gain their stats through antes, their unique ability, or status effects. Long story short, Sagas can then copy those and gain them for himself without having to manage their tokens, without having to fulfill the effects on their cards, or whatever. He gains them for free so long as he antes his mirror token. This turns Sagas into one of the most powerful brawlers in existence because he basically can outstat people by just keeping the stats the same. You see, Sagas' cards, though they may not have the best stats, have effects that allow Sagas to come out on the top of almost any exchange. Hence, he's a brawler. However, many brawlers have problems when it comes to characters that have big stats, like big priority, big power, or big range. Sagas can easily rectify that by simply copying those stats from the opponent and using it for himself. That, in conjunction with his ability to have very good styles and bases, means that Sagas can win out on almost any exchange against almost any opponent. It just requires proper management of tokens, as well as proper use of styles and bases. Now, if using Sagas is all about using the correct attack pairs, let's start with his styles. First up is Negation. And Negation is a very powerful style. Though it might have no stats, the passive effects on it are killer. Because, number one, if you have your mirror token, you win priority ties without clashing. But the most important part is number two. Your opponent's style doesn't apply to his attack except for their end of beat effects. This means that your opponent's style becomes blank except for end of beat effects. Think about how powerful that actually is. It degrades BattleCON into the game of, you guessed it, rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. You see, by using Negation, your style is technically blank, your opponent's style is technically blank, so you're just fighting with the bases. That means that if you're really good with your fundamentals, aka your base pentagons, you should be able to easily win the beat against anyone, because again, all they have left are their bases. And that really easily makes it very easy for Sagas to win the beat, because his opponent is playing against him who might have 3 styles, and 5 bases, a total of 15 possible attacks. However, if Sagas uses Negation, his opponent is technically only playing with 5 attacks. This makes Sagas very powerful, especially when you consider the first passive effect. Remember that if you have your mirror token, you win priority ties. This is very, very powerful because if you and your opponent play the same base, you win. Simple as that. You win because you win priority ties and you stun them most of the time. The only time this does not apply is when you use strike and your opponent uses strike. Because, well, neither of you get stunned, but both of you deal 4 damage, which is pretty okay. So the thing about this style is all about knowing the bases very well, knowing your positioning, and knowing specifically which bases can beat what at those positions. Now, when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend 2 that exemplify how Negation should be used. Number 1 is Grasp. If you're in melee range, playing Grasp ensures that you basically win that beat. Almost all the time. Because it's the fastest base, meaning no other bases can beat it, but at the same time, if you win priority ties, you beat your opponent's Grasp. This means that you're able to grasp your opponent and move them away from you and dodge almost anything except a shot. But if you're in melee range, who would use a shot anyway? Second, I highly recommend pairing this with Shot. Now, if you're far away from the opponent, a lot of attacks don't really hit. So Shot is the most powerful thing you can do at that range. But since your shot is technically faster than your opponent's shot, you're able to stun them out of their own shot, which is amazing. Next up is Echo. I changed the ordering of the styles this time because Echo is very important as a parallelism to Negation. Now, if Negation is all about making sure that your opponent's style is useless, Echo is all about making sure your opponent's style is really good. Because though it has no stats, on reveal, your opponent's style in discard 1 is applied to your attack. In essence, Echo copies your opponent's discard 1 style, aka the style they played the previous beat. This is very powerful because if your opponent has a really good style, say, I don't know, Clockwork, you can copy that and use it for yourself, which can be very powerful, especially if you are able to dash your opponent's big payout attack on the previous beat. Say that Cadenza does a Clockwork shot, you dash that, and then the next beat you hit them with his own Clockwork shot. That not only stings, but it's very good. Now note that Echo is only really as good as your opponent's discard 1 style, and of course it does make you somewhat predictable because your opponent will know that style is coming. But remember, Echo just basically reads whatever the style an opponent discard 1 is. So it's only as good as that style, so remember that Echo might not always be the best play. However, if you are able to use it in the proper situations and use your opponent's own strengths against them, you're in a good place. Know that if you anti your mirror token, you can basically copy your opponent's effects as well. The bonuses to power, prio, and range. This means that you basically turn into your opponent for 1 beat, which is pretty fun. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I can't suggest anything. Oh my goodness, because Echo is what your opponent's discard 1 style is. So, if you want to know good attack pairs with Echo, know the good attack pairs for that style. Simple as that. Next up is Repelling. Now, Repelling is a very interesting brawler type style. Though it does have minimum range, which can be a problem, it does give you range +2, which is very good if your opponent's planning to burst. However, the very big thing about this is the start of beat effect. Now, the start of beat effect is that you may spend a mirror token, and then if you do, opponents can no longer enter the spaces adjacent to Sagas, making it a natural dash counter. But bigger than that is that Sagas pushes all adjacent opponents 1 space away from him. This means that if your opponent's attack is purely melee range, you are able to dodge it easily with Repelling. With Repelling's positive priority, it's very good in conjunction with that start of beat effect. And then on hit, you can push the opponent up to 2 spaces. This makes Repelling a very powerful brawling attack. You hit your opponent, get some damage in, and make sure that they don't hit you back. Be it because of the push effect or because they can't ever be adjacent to you anymore. When it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing this with Burst because it allows you to push the opponent using Repelling and then burst away and then push them even more, bringing you really far away from any melee opponent who ever tries to get in on you. Or you can pair it with Grasp for that extra burst of priority, and of course, to get that free damage in. Next up is Shadow. Shadow is one of my favorite Saga styles because it's just so good. It has good, decent range. It has negative power, but that's okay because of the effects that are on it. Passively, Sagas considers the spaces on the edges of the board adjacent to him. Interesting, right? Now, before activating, he must move one space. Even more interesting. At an end of beat at range 3, you may spend your mirror token and repeat this attack. Really interesting. The way this basically works is that you can use it as a easy way to get out of almost any bad positioning because you can teleport to either end of the board, and that's really, really, really good. Note that you also consider spaces on the edges of the board adjacent when you're moving opponents. This means that if you pair this with Grasp or his unique base Staff, you're able to push the opponent to the opposite end of the board, which is really, really good. Now, the range 3 on the end of beat effect is very interesting because of one thing. The center of the board is at range 3 from the edges of the board. Meaning that if your opponent, or at least if you do something to make your opponent go to the center of the board, it's almost always an easy way for Shadow to proc the extra attack. This basically gives Shadow a lot of damage potential and a lot of utility as well, letting you get in or get out no matter what you want to do. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing this thing with his unique base Staff, because Staff allows you to push a person, which very, 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 very synergizes very well with his Shadow passive effect. And of course, for the very same reason, Grasp is a great pair as well. Next up is Shattering. This looks a lot like Repelling. It has range +1 to 2, it has positive power and negative priority this time though. It has Stun Guard 2, and Sagas can't regain his mirror token this beat. Why? Because the on-hit effect is amazing. You may spend a mirror token and then the next beat your attack has on-hit, the opponent is stunned. This is a very interesting attack because right now you're a slow, hulking juggernaut, but next beat you turn into a speedster that can stun anyone. This makes it a very versatile style and a very powerful one as well. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing this thing with Shot to make use of that Stun Guard 2, or Strike to make use of that range. And finally we have Staff. Sagas' unique base Staff has range 1 to 2, power 3, and priority 4. Stun Guard 4 does not stun at range 1. On reveal, if you anteed your mirror token, get this with me, if you anteed your mirror token, Staff becomes a copy of your opponent's unique base. This is very interesting, allowing Staff to have nearly infinite possibilities, and of course, you can make use of your opponent's powerful bases as your own. You're up against a Cadenza with a very powerful press, copy it. You're up against a Pendrose with a very powerful Haymaker, copy it. Now, do know that you do ignore all effects that contain that character's name, much like in Echo's effect. So this means that if your opponent's effect has a lot of their name on the text, it might not be worth copying. Now, on hit, you can push the opponent one space, and for the rest of the beat, they can no longer advance. This is a very powerful brawling attack. Staff on its own can push the opponent and then make sure that they don't get to retaliate back, so long as they don't have enough range to do so. And then, if you start copying your opponent's bases, you get so many possible attacks that it'll probably confuse your opponent, because Staff, in all essences, counts as 2 bases. Now when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing Staff with Shadow for reasons I've told you before, but one attack that I can really recommend it with is Negation. Staff on its own is a very powerful base. In fact, it beats out most enemy bases. So as long as you're range 2 and you play Negation Staff, it's almost always a win beat for you. So watch out for that. Now, when it comes to attack pairs for the bases you copy, know how good the styles you have are with those bases. I won't go over everything because that will drive me insane. Sagas' 2 Overdrive finishers are Soul Mirror and Assimilate. Soul Mirror is a comeback Overdrive finisher that's melee range, but really fast. You see, on hit, you and the opponent switch places, so oftentimes it's just like this, but you also switch life totals. This means that if your opponent has you really low on life and they're big on life, hit them with a soul mirror and suddenly you're the one who's winning now. This is a very powerful comeback overdrive finish and will really pressure your opponents who are at range 1, which is a very good thing because Sagas has 2 styles that have minimum range, which means that range 1 suddenly becomes covered in a sense. Now your opponent can't comfortably sit at range 1 from you because they might get soul mirrored. Now, if that's not your thing and you want something that's more consistent, we have Assimilate. Assimilate is a medium range overdrive finisher that deals decent damage but is fast as well. On hit, you literally take your opponent's cards and put them in your hand. Your opponent's attack pair goes into your hand and they no longer activate for the rest of that beat. Meaning that if you hit it well, your opponent, well, doesn't resolve their attack anymore. And it basically counts as a stun, but not exactly. Now for the rest of the duel, you can use those cards as your own, which is very, very interesting because of many things, but mostly because your opponent is now down 1 style and down 1 base. Meaning that from having 15 possible attacks, they now only have 8 possible attacks, and that's very good. However, you go from having 15 possible attacks to having 4 styles and 6 bases. 24 possible attacks. That's insane! You'll beat out your opponent almost all the time when it comes to option mongering, and that's very, very good as well. Now when it comes to his special action, Sagas really likes using Cancel, because it synergizes a lot with his unique ability. You see, you gain your mirror token back based on which cards are in their discard, and, well, doing Cancel puts a card in their discard, which gives you more options to get your mirror token back. However, Sagas is pretty okay with Pulse as well. Pulse is a very interesting attack. If you really have to be defensive, Pulse is the way to go. But oftentimes, using Assimilate or a Cancel is the best bet because you're a brawler. Now, note that for many characters with token effects, anteing your tokens applies to your overdrives as well. So if your opponent has a lot of passive bonuses or whatever, you can use that and buff your overdrives with it. Now let's move on to the part that everybody loves, Saga's advanced strategies and combos. Saga's advanced strategies can be diluted into 3 main points. Number 1, Negation. Proper use of Negation, I think, is one of the biggest things about Sagas because using Negation basically guarantees Sagas a win beat. So as long as every Negation beat you play is a win beat for you, you are ahead of the curve most of the time. So knowing how to use Negation properly is equated to knowing how bases work properly. So orient yourselves on how bases work, and I'm sure that Negation will almost always be a win beat for you. And if that's the case, you're well on your way to becoming a Sagas master. Number 2, Echo. Proper use of Echo is very crucial to Sagas as well, because it's one of your biggest styles. In a sense that, well, you can copy your opponent's biggest styles. Knowing how to properly use Echo is the crux to any good Sagas, because any good Sagas knows how to make use of an Echo very well, because it's about being opportunistic. You see, Echo seems to embody this thing about Sagas. It's all about being opportunistic. Many brawlers are opportunistic, but so much so Sagas. Sagas is way about opportunity. You see, acknowledging how Echo is good at that certain beat is a key thing you have to know in order to play Sagas well. Because sometimes you have to recognize when is it good to play any of my other styles? When is it good to copy a unique base using staff? When is it good to keep staff as it is? When is it good to use my mirror token? Do I use my mirror token all the time? You see, knowing all of these things and knowing your opponent's strength is key to playing Sagas. So I think knowing how to use Echo will easily guide you towards those things as well. And finally, number 3, proper token management. Sagas' token management is a bit weird compared to all of the other characters, but it's pretty much the same. If you're a single token character, whenever you use your token, it's almost always good to regain the token on the same beat. Sagas does this by simply playing an attack that has a base that is in your opponent's discard pile. Now, a lot of people might think, wait a minute, that will make you really predictable because your opponent now knows 2 possible attacks, blah 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 blah. No. You see, the thing is, your opponent can really only acknowledge that if you don't have your mirror token already. So this only really counts towards, beats wherein you've spent your mirror token and then didn't regain it. And then your opponent's now like, okay, so he doesn't have his mirror token, so he'll spend some time and resources to gain it back. However, that's not gonna be the case if you still have your mirror token. You see, if you still have your mirror token, you spend it within the beat, remember that the regain condition happens after all end of beat effects resolve, meaning that you can use your shadow, no problem, you can use your repelling, no problem, and you'll regain it in the same beat. It's beautiful, it's wonderful. Now, you're gonna say, then my opponent will just think I'll play those 2 bases every beat. But then if they think that every beat, it's pointless. You know what I mean? Because you can just easily not do it that beat, and suddenly your opponent will be confused. What to do, what to do, what to do. So in the end, that knowledge to your opponent doesn't mean a lot at all, so long as you do not play predictably, which again is a basic thing about this game, so it's no problem. Now let's move on to some Sagas combos. Number 1, Negation Staff. Negation Staff, like I said, is a very powerful attack. It allows you to beat almost any of the bases in existence, except your opponent's unique base. So be very careful about your opponent's unique base and try to play Negation Staff when it's in their discard. Otherwise, Staff beats out almost any base in existence and Grasp trades negatively against it. So, in a sense, Negation Staff is a very, very, very powerful attack, and I really think it will beat out almost anything and it will almost always guarantee you a win beat. Next up is Shadow Staff. Shadow Staff is another powerful attack that Sagas has that allows them to not only evade enemies really well, but also get in on enemies really well. Shadow Staff is only as good as you, the player, are, because acknowledging when and where Shadow Staff can be useful is very crucial. For example, your opponent's at the opposite side of the board, and you're at the other side of the board. A lot of people will look at Shadow and think, no, it doesn't have enough range, it doesn't have enough movement. But acknowledging that Shadow can let you teleport to the other side of the board is a very powerful thing to do. Do note that the adjacency thing is optional. See, it says that you just consider the edges of the board adjacent, but it doesn't mean that the spaces that are actually adjacent to you are no longer adjacent. This means that sometimes you want to just push your opponent the one space and not towards the opposite end of the board. So be very careful about that when using Shadow Staff. And finally, we have Repelling Burst. Repelling Burst might not seem like some attack that you use all the time, but I highlight it here because it's one of Sagas' biggest gap creators, and against melee opponents, it's a very, very big boon to have them away from you. Repelling Burst is just really good, and I really, really like the attack because it allows you to dodge a lot of things. And if your opponent's not fast enough, of course, you can the positive priority on repelling allows you to hit them and possibly stun them as well. And that pretty much does it for this episode of Battle Guides. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Sagas is one of my friends' favorite characters. He played Sagas a lot, so I know how annoying this guy is. But he's a very cool character, and he's only really as good as the player and the opponent's character. Being good with Sagas is about being good with everyone else in the game. Knowing when those characters are powerful and knowing when their styles are really good is crucial to making sure that Sagas' mirror token, echo style, as well as his staff base get the biggest value. Now, if you like this video, like the game, or like the character, check the description out below for more level 99 game stuff. If you want to join the community, talk to me or any of the other BattleCON veterans, check the description out below for links to the community, as well as my email if you want to email me. Want to write a comment or ask me a question? Comment section down below and I'll answer as soon as possible. Nothing else to say, but don't forget your special action, and thank you, World of Indines. Thank you, and good night.